Welcome to Mom Breaks. This episode features Meghan and Colin, a couple whose lives were profoundly reshaped by postpartum psychosis after the birth of their second child. Meghan is a writer and mindfulness teacher whose work is informed by her lived experience with postpartum psychosis, an experience that brought her very close to losing everything she cared about. After 20 years in public education, including teaching, working in the nation's largest school district, and founding a nonprofit consulting agency, she now teaches mindfulness, self-inquiry, and compassion as tools for understanding our inner lives. Her writing and advocacy challenge cultural expectations around motherhood, achievement, and what it means to live well. And she's been featured with her work in outlets like Psychiatric Times and the Journal of Psychiatry and the Law. Colin is a legislative and political strategist whose career has focused on bringing people of diverse backgrounds together to create positive change, from gun violence prevention and voting rights to now micromobility with car-free transportation. Their family's experience with postpartum psychosis fundamentally shifted how he thinks about leadership, work, and what truly matters. Today, as a team leader professionally and a dad to three, he prioritizes well-being, emotional honesty, and making space for all the feelings that inevitably show up at work and at home. He's a devoted kids soccer coach and lifelong New England sports fan. In this conversation, we talk candidly about what it feels like to have the rug pulled out from under your life with postpartum psychosis, navigating the experience as a partner, and the process of getting help and even delaying calling or getting help because of concern about repercussions. We reflect on life in New York City, the wisdom of mental health proxies, and what it means to consider having another child after postpartum psychosis. Trigger warning, we discuss suicidal delusions, a family member suicide, and police involvement getting Meghan to the psych ward. And there is some swearing. Take care while you listen. Meghan and Colin, thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
To kick off, I'd love to hear, what are your favorite types of parenting breaks or something for you?
I'd say a couple things for me. I think, ironically, coaching kids soccer is actually critical for me, even though it's more time with literally dozens of additional children, including my own. Being able to have that as an outside venture for myself is critical for me to be able to come back and really feel like I'm doing something other than parenting and other than working. And so I'd say for myself, coaching is critical for that, finding that space. That's a big ticket piece for me. I certainly think finding time for ourselves away from our kids, date nights, being able to travel together when possible is really important. Throughout the years, I'll give Meghan a ton of credit for this. Finding time for exercise has been really important, both running and going to the gym, and really being able to get a sweat on and get a workout in has been critical to come back and be like, okay, now I'm ready to go again. And so I would say those are the big ticket pieces for me.
I'm surprised you didn't say watching sports.
Yeah, and watching sports. But usually I'm with the kids when I'm watching
Fair,
sports.
fair. I'm more introverted than Colin is, so coaching children doesn't seem like a relaxing and rejuvenating activity for me. So I deeply rely on moving my body. I love to run, I love to bike, I love to do yoga. Anything, honestly, that gets me out of my head. So like if it's putting on music, even while I'm doing the dishes, dancing, writing, laughing. Some of that I try and do with my kids. So it's not that I'm just, I only do that away from them. We do laugh a lot as a family. But in terms of my own time, it's probably moving a pen on paper, moving my body, and listening to music.
Yeah, I love all those things. Yes, I think for me, moving my body is crucial.
Yes.
Even just for well-being. Aside from parenting, it helps my mental health too. So, okay, you were living in New York City after your second baby. You had a toddler and an infant. I'd love to hear about what that was like. You're both working, parenting in a bustling city that never sleeps. How would you describe the year leading up to your experience with postpartum psychosis?
I would describe it as kind of like existing on the margins, like just doing everything to barely keep everything afloat. So it's like you're barely making rent, even though you're both working important jobs. You're barely getting the kids here and there and back in time, even though like you're trying your hardest. So it felt like just barely keeping everything afloat, I would say, is what the year before felt like that. I would
Mm.
say before we had a second baby, it felt like you could just pack our little infant and bike around New York and hang out at restaurants and bars and bring the baby. But once we had a mobile toddler and a baby, I often say like we used to make New York City our playground, but then we just spent time at New York City's playground. So it was like, it was a lot less fun, I would say, the
Yeah.
year before.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's funny. I view it through the lens that I had at the time, where I was probably like telling myself a lie that this is great and it's super hard and brutal, but so worth it to continue to be in New York. And then I look at it now and I'm like, no, that was just really hard and brutal. And maybe the clock had ticked down to zero already for when we should have moved out of New York, just given how hard
Mhm.
it was. But I mean, I think it was like, I'd be at dropping both girls off at daycare at the door, waiting for them to open the doors at 7 a.m. And then we would pick them up at 6, right when they closed. Then we'd go back and we'd be with them for between 1 to 3 hours, depending on sleep. And then it's right back to work again,
The next day, yeah.
and doing all those things. So it was definitely on the margins, and it was just like everything you had to just barely squeak through and be able to make it. But again, I
Hmm.
think I told myself a story at the time, certainly, that I was like, this is so great. This is like, and it just, I'm gonna prove that I/we can do it. I'm
Mm.
not sure who I'm proving it to, but that was how I felt at the time. But it was just like brutally exhausting, um, just to do anything. I mean, we talk about when with one child, we could go to the bar, we could do this. With two, it was like, okay, we got to whole load up our whole lives onto this double stroller and try to make it
Uh-huh.
through the world.
It's essentially a car.
Yeah.
Essentially a car, but I have to carry that car down the stairs to the subway in New York City, and it was just all the things. So, yeah,
Ah, yeah. Yeah. I remember carrying a stroller like 5 months pregnant and carrying my toddler in a stroller down like a
yeah,
Times Square subway station where I'm like,
Mhm.
why is there not a better option
I
here?
know.
it was.
Yeah.
It was after having our kids in New York. It really makes you realize the New York City subway has almost no working elevators. They do not function, and you're like, oh, now I get why this is a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. New York City is beautiful and tough with
Hmm.
tiny kids.
I'll
Oh,
never forget, I was picking up, this was after I experienced postpartum psychosis, but I was picking up Millie from daycare and I saw this other parent and he just looked exhausted and I could see myself in his eyes. And he was like, yeah, if everything is exactly in its place in our apartment, it's basically tenable. But if one little thing moves, it's totally unlivable because when you have that many humans in that small of a space, it's
hmm.
just like everything has to be just so. And if anything moves just a little bit, it's like, yeah, an explosion. So,
Yeah, yes, yes. I feel like I've never been as aware of how I'm not from New York. I'm a transplant. And when I go back and visit family on the West Coast, I'm like, you are wasting space. How are you not making better use of this closet or whatever it is?
We had a 3 bedroom, 1 bedroom, which was a 1 bedroom apartment that we turned Megan's nice walk-in closet, which was lovely,
which was rare and
which is rare in New
lovely.
York. We turned that into June's
Like
bedroom,
the nursery.
and the crib just exactly, if you built it inside, it could fit inside. For Millie, in classic New York City fashion, we built a 3rd bedroom inside our living room. We leased walls from Manhattan pressurized walls, and built another bedroom, which my closet was now inside of, in order to give her a space. So we had essentially 3 bedrooms in our 750 square foot.
And
Oh.
Colin would like army crawl at night after she was in the bed to get stuff in the closet.
Yeah.
So it was basically
Yes.
that's what it was like.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We did the same thing with like we did like a partition to make a 1 bedroom, a 2 bedroom too.
Mm.
Just extend it as much as you can. So, how would you describe your pregnancy? Did you feel any complications during your pregnancy with your second?
I'm like so good at being pregnant. I'm like
Mm.
terrible at being postpartum, which we'll talk about. But I really feel good. I move my body. I ran until my due date, you know.
Wow.
But again, movement is part of my mental health plan. So I felt really good. I felt really good with both of our kids all the way up to the end physically and
Yeah,
pretty emotionally too. Yeah.
For sure.
Mm.
that's great. And then your birth experience, what was that like?
We had Millie at the midwives at Columbus Circle, and
Mm.
she was late, like June was late. It was like a groovy experience. We had this midwife that kept calling me babe. Hey, babe, babe. She was like really just like West Coast, maybe, I don't know. And it was a natural birth. We went in and then I think got sent back to walk around the city for a
Oh.
while. And then she ended up, as she said it, I'm gonna swipe the fuck out of you.
Yeah.
She swiped my cervix, and
Oh.
then we had the
Yeah.
baby that night. And yeah, but we were back home in less than 24 hours. You know, there's that feeling when you're back in your space, at least for me, that can make you feel like you're yourself again. And I
Yeah.
remember being like, oh, I'm home. And then I tried to open an umbrella stroller and I almost passed out. And I was like, oh, wait, don't be that home. Like, you know,
Oh, well, you need to
so
be in bed.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the wild thing about being at St. Luke's with the natural childbirthers. They're like, okay, if it works here, then like normally you're give birth and you're there for 2, maybe 3 days, or at least a night. And it was like not even 24 hours, and we were somehow already back. And it was like, oh my gosh, like okay, I guess we're because she was born at a little past midnight,
Hmm.
so a very late night birth, and then we didn't even spend a night there. Like
Yeah.
wow,
3 o'clock that
that's
afternoon, we
fast.
were leaving.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fast. How would you describe your support network going in?
I would say nearly zero in New York City. So, like, I'm from a big family of one of seven, but they all live where we live in Cleveland. He has family in New Hampshire, but we like had no support system, I would say. We had daycare and like we were like the first of our friends to have kids too. Although we did have one set of friends that had kids and they had their first and then they left the city after that. Um,
Mm,
but so I would say our support system was really, really lacking.
hmm.
But it's interesting. It was I was holding up a zero. We have zero support, but it was just getting back to like how was it the year leading up to it. I don't want to speak for you on this, but at least I can speak for myself. I don't think I like proactively would say we have no support network, but it was almost like a we got this, like we don't basically I don't need support network type of
Yeah.
thing, and like we're gonna like do our own thing in New York and we're just gonna like make it work. And then we had basically zero local support for us. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We had moved to the suburbs a few months before my second was born, and I had my psychosis experience. And I know exactly that energy. Like, we don't know anyone. It's fine. Like,
Yeah.
we got this. We're making it work.
Yeah.
How would you describe your relationship with mental health before you had kids?
I think it's my experience, like I don't have any underlying disorders or anything. I mean, I think of mental health really differently than I did before postpartum psychosis, right? Because I feel like we all have mental health issues. Like some days you feel a little down, some days you
Yeah.
feel like whatever. So I think that there's a real disservice that we do to mental health by sort of compartmentalizing it into diagnoses and whatnot versus just like the range of thoughts and feelings and emotions that come with
Hmm.
being a human. But in terms of how we classically think of mental health, I had no previous health background. I realized that I have definitely always been somebody who's really sensitive to hormones. So, like, when
Mm.
my period comes, I will have what am I doing with my life feelings, sometimes not wanting to live feelings and whatnot. But those are really associated around my hormones. I see them better than I ever have been able to. I am somebody, though, who, like, again, I need to like move my body. Like that to me is more important than brushing my teeth because it makes me feel better. So
Yeah.
I'm not like always sunny all the time, but I don't have I didn't have any like prior mental health history. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to say that I was like wildly negative towards the concept of mental health. It was like a combination of slightly oblivious to the importance of it, maybe mixed with a tinge of uh, wanting to ignore or acknowledge my own or anybody else's mental health or sort of like emotional needs. Um,
Mm.
like I remember so stupidly being like, it's been years since I've ever cried. And I was like, that's great. That's what you should do. You should just kind of like keep trucking and just like, don't let the emotions hit you. Just keep plowing forward. And I was a
Yeah.
manager of a large team and I just was like, oh, there's no crying at work. Come on, you got to be able to like put this stuff aside and,
Be a
whatever
good
else
worker.
be a worker. And I wouldn't say I had a disrespect for, therapy or therapists, but it was certainly never top of, or never crossed my mind as a tool to try to get through any difficult points in life. So for me, it was a lot of like, sure, I would acknowledge its importance of mental health and taking care of your mental health, but like not in any sort of real, actual way. And certainly had some, probably baggage associated with it. But yeah, complete flip now to to how I feel about it. But I look back and I see sort of the stupidity and the ignorance of my views given what we've been through and how important it is for everybody. So
Mm. Yeah. In your families of origin, were you aware of any mental health in your broader family?
Not really. Nothing to speak of.
no, not that I'm aware of. And I would also say like on my family side, I don't think it's a topic that like a lot of families where it gets discussed a lot, even if there was, but there was no knowns of like mental health stuff on my side that
Yeah.
even put it on, at least on my radar from a family perspective.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. I had a cousin who committed suicide. And even then, it was like, oh, that was his problem. He
Mhm.
had depression, but like we are all fine.
Yeah.
It's like not fun to talk about. And I also like it's so important to talk about, even though,
100%.
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I'm becoming the mental health person that people know they can talk about hard things
Totally.
with.
Yeah.
And I'm here for that. Like I will be that person in the family who is like, I will talk to you about my psychiatrist. This is important to talk about.
Totally. Since I had postpartum psychosis, and I do a lot of advocacy around it, but like people will randomly call me or be like, "Can we go for a walk? Can we talk?" And because they know I'm like, it's all there's no shame. Just tell me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a weird and also wonderful existence.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
it's funny for me, it's like I'm gonna just think about like work and my approach now to managing a team. It's a total 180. I'm like, let's let the tears come out. Let's let the emotions flow. Like I'm here. Like if you want to talk about it, we can. Let's talk about our lives as humans before we do work. If we don't get to the work stuff because we talk about all the things that are happening in our lives, that's fine too. But now I'm like, let's go. Like sometimes maybe we'll
Yeah.
both cry. Who knows?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just a very different perspective on it. And I feel like it's been for both of us. We talked before about parent breaks, right? And I think about the things, and it's often many of the same things, going for a run or other things, like what do we need to do to create breaks for our own mental health, just to be proactive on it, which is
Mhm.
never something I would have like thought about previously. Now I'm like, oh, okay, oh, I'm not feeling great. What should I do to address the feelings I'm having? Versus before, it was just like, let me just bury those and
Yeah.
hope that they go away over time.
Yeah, like they're not important. We don't need to
Yeah,
talk about it.
totally.
How lucky your team must be. And I think that makes you all a better team, better
For sure.
productivity, like better headspace. And so we need more of that, that human-centered, like we
Yeah,
can
for
talk
sure.
about it because it is relevant
Yeah.
to work. Okay, so your experience with postpartum psychosis, you were, let's see, hospitalized at 8 months. First, I want to hear broadly, how would you describe postpartum psychosis?
Oh, gosh, it's so hard to describe. Um, I feel like the way that's easiest for me to like cue into something people are aware of is to, in my experience, it was like I was almost in the center of that movie, The Firm, right? I don't know if you've
Mm,
seen it with Tom Cruise years
mm-mm,
ago, or like in an instant, the entire world is against you, and you are the
mm,
center actor that they are trying to harm or pull onto their side. And your children are also an asset that they're trying to get to too. And it just happens in an instant. So I would say it's it's like having the rug pulled out from under everything in your life very,
mhm.
very quickly and dramatically.
Colin, what would you say?
Uh, I'll use this. We're just gonna throw analogies around. For me, from like my I can't speak from Megan's perspective, but from like my experience with it, it was the definition of somebody just coming up to your table and completely flipping it upside down and just with your entire life on the table and in a moment, in a way in which I never thought. It's so funny. Megan said to me yesterday, "Do you think you're gonna cry during thing?" And I was like, "Almost definitely," as I'm already feeling in my chest at the moment.
Oh.
But it was in an instant. I never thought a human brain could flip in the way that it did. I was literally just like, what world am I living in that within a matter of hours, it went from being just like our quote unquote regular life to one in which like I have Megan trying to like get the girls, trying to jump off the roof, punching me in the face, being in attack mode and just absolutely truly psychotic behavior, but that it was like so fast and so sudden that it was like it felt how do I put this? It almost felt like I couldn't find my way like back to the top. It just I feel like I was just like sinking further in terms of like my realization of like what is happening around. Every one of her behaviors were so extreme and outlandish that it just like sent me sort of reeling further and further back. I have literally no words to explain what is happening in this moment, and it's so hard to comprehend because it's so fast and
Hmm.
just so severe. It never felt like a gradual on-ramp to it. It felt like somebody coming and completely flipping over the kitchen table.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And having two young kids is already a lot, like caring for them, caring for you, and then to have your life partner suddenly needing immediate care, and your kids are still there, and you don't have support systems, and you're in New York City. My spouse talked about one of the hard things being not knowing what the future would be.
Mhm.
And like when I'm in the psych ward, juggling the kids and being like, what is our life gonna be? Like, what does this mean for us? Does that resonate with you?
100%. In those peak psychosis moments, my mind was processing so fast. There was a moment where and we have a very small apartment, but I was constantly going back and forth between how do I keep Megan from going to the roof? And then how do I keep her away from the girls who were in our bedroom? I had my back up against the door to our bedroom with my feet against the dresser to try to like have enough weight so Megan couldn't barge through. And then as soon as she would stop pounding on the door, I'd have to run out and try to stop her from running out of the apartment. And at the same time, I remember like as I'm there pinning my back up against the door, I was just would be like be through my work on gun violence prevention before I have worked with law
Oh.
enforcement a lot over the course of my career. And so I'm very familiar with through a mental health lens, but also not this was domestic violence, but through domestic violence lens, how easy it is for somebody to lose access to their kids. I remember in those moments being like, if I call the police right now, am I setting this up where she's never going to have access to and see the kids ever again? And so it's like, how do I save? That sounds really like grandiose. How
Wow.
do I like save my kids' lives, save her life, and also make the decision for like when is it? What do I need to protect us all that doesn't put us in a situation
Legal repercussions.
where
You were
she
thinking bigger. You're like, what are the
yeah,
ramifications?
totally. And I was like, she may never like see the kids again. If I do this, I make this phone call, like I have no idea what's going to happen on the other side of it. And then in addition to, I remember as soon as the NYPD came and she was handcuffed, that's when I was in the moment of like, oh, I have no idea what if like am I ever gonna see her in her former self ever again? Will we ever be like a family ever again? And then not knowing for a long time what the answer is gonna be. So yeah.
Wow.
So yes, that long way of saying it does resonate with me
Yeah.
and incredibly scary. That sort of that sense that the total lack of answers to anything was really, really scary.
How did you get help?
Yeah. Eventually I called 911. At first, I called my sister-in-law many times in the morning. It was very early, and she didn't answer. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. Uh, she's a psychologist, she's a social worker, and so was looking for her help and guidance on what to do. Of course, she lived in Cleveland, so that wasn't going to be super helpful. I called our other friend who's also a social worker, and I called your parents, and just like looking, I think, for some sort of like validation
Yeah.
or like understanding what's going through. But eventually, when I spoke to our friend, she got on the phone with Megan. Here we go. When she's like, well, put me on the phone with Meg. I was basically describing what's happening, and it's all wild in the background. She's like, well, let me talk to Megan. She got on the phone with Megan for a second. Then I got the phone back, and she's like, hang up, call 911 immediately. That was probably, I don't know what, 4 hours into
Mhm.
just like peak chaos, sort of war zone, like maybe not war zone, but peak chaos. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I ended up calling 911. I have no idea how long until they arrived later, but yeah.
Huh. Megan, do you remember him calling 911? Were you aware?
I wasn't aware that he called 911. I felt like the whole time, like when he was on the phone with whoever he was on the phone with, that he was hoping that I was gonna like crack the code to like save us. So I thought he was trying to buy me more time before like the cult that I believed was coming in to
Yeah.
kill us
Uh-huh.
was coming. I wasn't sure he was on the bad side when he was making phone calls. I was like, he's like disappointed in me that I can't figure out how to get us out of this, and he's trying to buy me a little bit more time.
Uh-huh. Okay, we kind of are already at seeking help, but how would you describe the onset of psychosis?
The first thing I would say is when I went back to work after having Millie, I felt good. And then I took on like this really, really terrible project that was
Mm,
way too much stress to be taking on. And that was in July that I remember saying to Colin when we got out of the city for a week, I don't feel like myself. And he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I just feel anxious and a bit sad. And we'd be like,
mm,
oh, well, if you don't feel that way in 2 weeks, go see somebody. But neither of us were like raised with therapy as a form of routine care or whatnot. So, like, once we were back in the city, it was like easy to keep kicking that can down the road and not going to see somebody. That level of not feeling like myself was the new normal, if that makes sense, for months. That was July. And then Friday, December 5th, 2015, I went to work on the subway and I couldn't focus enough to complete basic tasks like open the door. So I started to narrate, like, oh, you're reaching out your hand for the door. Like it was almost like I was tethering myself in what my body was doing.
mm.
And then I made it through a whole day of work. I had some outbursts of laughter. I have had an inappropriate laughter problem in my entire life. So that wasn't a red flag. But I remember having some weird thoughts, like there was something in the building that was making me a little giddy. I made it through all day at work. I stepped on the subway to go downtown to meet a friend at a happy hour that was in from San Francisco. And that was like when the floor dropped out. Like as soon as I stepped on the subway, I was like positive everybody was staring at me. I thought I was being surveilled. The earbuds in their ears were communicating messages through their phones. And that's sort of like when complete delusions and paranoia overtook my rational brain. It swallowed reality for me.
Mhm. Colin, what would you say for you? When did the first signs show up?
I mean, it's it's somewhat hard to answer because I would sort of bucket it in sort of two categories or two timelines, which is the weeks and months leading up to that Friday, December 5th, which again, I never thought a human brain could flip so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, certainly our conversations when we'd be coming back from some place about her not feeling like herself. She should go see somebody. And then, as Megan said, we kick that can down the road over and over again. In reflection, I think so. Just before her psychosis, I had to go on a work trip for 2 nights. And if I had to travel for work, I'd want to try to like position her for success with the kids and make sure things are in order or whatever. It was so, my actions prior to going on that trip were so over the top. I literally made like every meal, labeled it in the, I had never done this before. Like, here's the Tuesday night dinner, here's the Wednesday one. I picked out outfits for the girls, put them in bags and labeled the bags. So like, and I would, that to me is like so over, is so not what I ever do and so
Like
over.
he's never ever done
I've
anything like
never, it was
he's
like,
not like that kind of organized person.
yeah,
It's like this
whatsoever.
is like wildly
This is like the antithesis of who I am. I'm just a little more like, I don't know, we'll figure it out and let me help you out a little bit ahead of time. And this was so over the top that, again, in hindsight, it was a clear signal. I obviously knew she wasn't doing well. And so like that to me was a clear signal, but there was no behavior that would have led me to believe something as severe and extreme was about to come down the pike. Like did not think it was possible. So like, yeah, we had conversations about it. Things weren't necessarily feeling amazing, and I obviously thought she probably needs extra support while I'm away for a couple of nights, but no signs that this was even like a remote possibility.
I also think it's important, like when he was talking about the chaos in our apartment that morning, the battlefield nature. I came home from, I got on the train, I went to that happy hour. I thought everybody, it was a recruitment event, so I left. But I walked into our apartment and it was about 6 o'clock, probably on a Friday night. And I spent from 6 o'clock till bedtime with him, but I was able to keep it all in sitting next to him because I thought he was maybe on the other side. So I had to keep everything I knew in because I wasn't sure whose side he was on. So even though we were in like this tiny apartment together and I am totally deluded and in another reality where I'm battling him and the entire city, or I'm pretty sure he's in on it, I was able to keep all my kind of crazy thoughts inside because I was gearing up to escape and figure out a way to save me and the kids. So
And I
Yeah.
did that Friday night, your behavior was definitely different. We ordered sushi and you didn't touch it.
because I figured he poisoned it.
You had some issues with the TV. We were watching it, whatever. But it was definitely quite unlike her. But I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like,
Meanwhile, like the TV was changing to threaten me. I was having visual hallucinations, but I didn't know why he wasn't responding to them. And I was just like, I just gotta, you know what, I'm just tired. I need to go to bed.
yeah.
So.
And then Saturday morning, peak insanity began. So
Yeah. Did you sleep that night? Were you able to?
No, I just like kept opening the windows because I thought they were releasing poisonous gas in our apartment. It was December in New York. Our fridge had been rattling, and in my psychosis, I was like, oh, the rattling fridge is releasing gas. So I kept on opening the windows, and he'd be like, Meg, close the windows. It's freezing. What are you doing? But I kept getting up and doing that and checking on the kids to make sure they were alive. Um, and mostly I was trying to figure out a way out. There was a moment of euphoria that night. I was like, oh, I know what this is. He's like in the CIA and he's going to tell me tomorrow. Like, and then everything will be, this will clear all this up. We're going to Argentina to live a new life. By the way, we were going to Argentina and Uruguay in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We had a trip planned. So my mind wasn't
Wow.
like that original. And also, he did try to be in the CIA years ago. So, like, my mind also
Oh.
was like pulling from other stuff. But that night I woke him up, I'm like, tell me, just tell me now. He's like, you're gonna ruin tomorrow. And I thought he was talking about some big surprise, but he was like, we need to sleep. We're parents, like sleep, you're gonna ruin tomorrow
Oh.
by like staying awake. So
can we also just like pause like that? We talked before about like this need to prove ourselves in New York and do this thing, and we don't need support, blah blah. We we were about to take. We were literally 2 weeks away. Your parents were gonna come, but your parents are a little bit older, anyways. But we were about to take an 8-month-old and a 2-year-old to Argentina for like 3 weeks, and it was like
a friend of ours was getting married in Uruguay, so we were gonna
we're
go.
like, let's all go as a family, and we'll make it a huge trip, and it's gonna be so great. And it's like, in hindsight, it's like, what were we think? What were we thinking? Yeah,
I mean, adventure. You
yeah,
wanna travel with kids. That is an ambitious travel schedule.
Mhm.
Like
yeah,
Uruguay, Argentina
yeah,
is far.
yeah,
Wow. That's a bummer you missed it, but also you
yeah,
probably needed some.
Bellevue was fantastic that time of year.
Uh, okay. Are there any other like hindsight's 2020, but any other like early signs as you look back, like before that Friday?
I mean, sometimes you say when in the cab when you were like, "Do you need me to get anything from Penn Station?" And I was like, "Just get home from the work trip," and you were like, "You were so mean."
Honestly, I thought you were just being bitchy. I was just like, ah, God. So, I mean, I wish that's the scary thing for me is I wish I could sit here and be like, ah, yeah, hindsight, I see X, Y, and Z things that could lead to it. I just don't, in terms of going from where she was to psychosis, I
I,
just didn't see.
I have two other things. One, I had, because of this nightmare contract I was on and my belief that I had to help out with it in a crazy way, I pulled an all-nighter with some colleagues a couple weeks before, and I'd never done that, trying to
Uh,
do this deck for this contract. It was
wow.
terrible. So that was one sort of like precipitating event. And then I remember after that being at like was it like a Halloween thing at daycare? I was telling Colin that I kind of felt like I was not fully there. He probably doesn't remember that,
I
but
don't.
I was at this parent event and it was almost like now what I know is was happened to me during psychosis is like you're kind of there, but you're also processing behind it. I remember like trying to talk to these parents and feeling out of it, and that may have been connected to the all-nighter. I don't remember the exact sequence of things, but those were two things that felt really abnormal for me. Felt the
Mm,
effects of my brain
mm.
being exhausted, and I didn't know psychosis was even possible naively.
Yeah. Did you know? Had you heard about postpartum psychosis?
No, no,
Okay.
not at
Same.
all. And it took
Never
two
heard
months
it.
for somebody to diagnose it as
Oh,
postpartum psychosis.
yes. Yes. I noted that down. So when you did get to Bellevue, what did you understand about what was happening?
I still was in psychosis, so I thought I had been captured by the people that were coming to get me, and they had gotten me.
Oh,
And
so in your delusion, you like lost.
yeah, and it's all like, oh, now here I am. And then they sedated me, and then I woke up and I went to the bathroom once when I first woke up. I walked into the bathroom and the light turns on, and there's this roommate who's scratching herself a lot in the night. And I hear this
Oh.
hum in the bathroom, and it was just like the fan or whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm on a jet airliner on our way to Argentina. All of the delusions were sort of mixing.
Oh.
Where we on our to start our new life in Argentina? Is that the hum? Is that this giant airliner that I'm on in Bellevue? When I went to Bellevue, I was still sort of fighting for my life. I tried to escape a few times because I thought the kids might still be alive. And if I
Oh.
could escape and get to them was one idea. Another idea was like, maybe I just need to go through those doors to get to the roof to prove my loyalty. So like everything will stop. It almost felt like
Oh.
this movie set. And if I could just like figure out the right thing, everybody would go like cut and life would go back to normal. And so I was
Mm.
like fighting to escape and had to be sedated
Yeah,
and
you were brought in on a Saturday morning, and was it Wednesday? What was the day I got you to take the medicine?
I was like,
Tuesday or Wednesday. So it was 4 or 5 days of like I would
Mm.
go to every visiting hours. The delusions and things were continuing on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and so
Mm.
um, it wasn't until we were able to finally convince you to take whatever medication it was you had refused to take it previously that I feel like I don't want to say the psychosis stopped, but we were able to get you into a mental space to be able to like I don't know
back to
start
Understand what
started
was
being
start
happening.
put into
start to come back
reality.
to
Yeah.
reality. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah. So when I was in the psych ward, there was like mandatory nurse station times where you had to go and take your medication. Was it not that way for you?
They would call your name, but they weren't gonna force you to take it. So
Oh.
Megan, and then they'd have the cart, but you could not take the medicine. But
Oh.
then what would happen is then I would try and escape, and then I would be forcefully sedated. So
Okay.
I was getting some medicine to ground me back in my body, but only when I would act out because you can't force somebody.
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation with the nurses and the doctors, and they were basically like, you've got to really, really try to get her to take this because the next step is to go to court to force her to do it. And they're like, it's a really, really ugly process. And they're like, so just whatever you can do to try to get her to take the medicine.
Yeah. I've heard of like the voluntary versus involuntary admission. Is that kind of under that umbrella?
I was involuntarily committed, but you can't force somebody to take medicine without written paperwork, in my understanding, so much so that actually now he has a mental health proxy for me in case this were to ever happen to me again, that says like if I get sick, let him or my sister make me take medicine. Because like I had a roommate who was in that litigation process with her spouse. He was working on forcing her to get the medicine. I don't know all of the illegalities of it, but I know how it played out in that instance. And I know now I have a preventative situation where that to ever happen again. Just like give me the medicine.
Okay, I've never heard of that. Like a mental health proxy. That's smart. I should probably have one of those. Can you share more about your symptoms? We've touched on them. Delusions, paranoia, hallucinations, decreased need for sleep, grandiosity or special powers. Can you speak to more of that?
Yeah, sure. Delusions for sure. Like again, I was kind of the center of this nefarious plot, and everybody was out to get me and my kids. I thought in an instant when I walked into that gathering, I saw all of these people I used to work with in my life. Instead of thrilled to see them as they walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, the last 10 years of my life have been in a sham leading up to this very moment where they're trying to recruit me to be part of this money-making cultish scheme that I couldn't explain. Who's watching your kids was the moment at which I was like, oh, she's threatening me. My kids are going to be killed if I am not part of this. That was when I left the bar, ran home, switched sides of the streets in case people were following me, and then threw open the apartment door. The first thing he said to me is, why are you home? And instead of being like, oh, he's wondering why I left this gathering with friends, meanwhile, he'd just been out of town, I was like, oh, he wanted me to join. He's on their side. So the words, why are you home, was like an indication that he was on the wrong side. So that I was in a completely deluded plot from the moment I stepped on the subway at around 5 p.m. until I was at Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital, right? Because I was still trying to escape. So that was part of it. I would also say I felt like my brain was processing so well, honestly. Like I remember being like, God, if I could like think like this all the time, I could like fucking cure cancer. Because like, wow, my brain is like, it would just like shore up anything. Everything was so connected. And it was like wild how quick it worked.
You tried to buy our apartment from our landlord.
Because I thought it was a real estate scheme. And I was like, oh, if I just tell the landlord I want to buy our apartment for like $2 million, which by the way, we didn't have any money saved. He's like, you called Jimmy? He like hated our landlord. And then I was like, oh, I disappointed him. I thought that was the way out. So I had those kinds of thoughts. I also had visual hallucinations. So again, we were watching the TV. The show got replaced by the face of my uncle, who was suddenly threatening me. Like, if she thinks she's getting out of this alive, she has another thing coming. The morning it got really intense between us, Colin handed me an Us magazine. He came back from the mail and he takes like a couple things, and one is Between the World and Me by Coates, and he puts it on our breakfast bar. There's a review on it from Toni Morrison that says required reading. And I was like, oh,
Toni Morrison.
Required reading. Like of the cult. It was like the first set of required reading. So I don't know what the actual psychiatric term for that is.
Like meaning making out of mundane things.
Yeah. And then the same thing with the Us magazine when he tried to be like, go read an Us to calm down, to himself some time to figure out what was going on. I was reading those pages and like the quotes were about me. So there's a specific name for that in psychiatry that's escaping me right now. But I had visual hallucinations, complete delusions, paranoia, where things are speaking to you in a unique and solitary sort of way.
Gonna go to the roof.
Yes. That I wouldn't know if to call that as a symptom, though, like a tactic. Yeah.
Right.
But
you yeah, that was like a delusion, right? Maybe you were acting or trying to act on.
yes, I was thinking if I show I'm willing to jump, then they'll know that I'm loyal to this cult and save our lives. Basically, the storyline of what I was trying to do in those 36 hours is figure out what I was up against, assess where Colin was in terms of his loyalty to the bad thing versus our family. My first hope was to escape with everybody alive and free, including him.
Mm.
My second strategy was like, I just take the girls and leave him and everybody and get free. And then my third was like, I just submit to this cult and we'll be alive, but we won't be free. And so I was sort of trying all those three strategies across the hours. And as it got more dire, I was like, I just need to submit to this thing I'm up against, i.e., go to the roof and show I'm willing to jump. Of course, the scary and weird thing about delusional and psychotic thinking is that it always just kind of keeps changing. So, like, I'm pretty sure if I got to the roof, I would have jumped off the roof, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm very
Yeah,
grateful
that's
that I didn't.
so you never made it up to the roof.
No, because he would just
He's holding
reach
you.
the door, and thankfully, we're really, really competitive. But it was the one time that I was excited that he was faster and stronger than me.
Yeah, we can celebrate that for this time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
That's like a little bit of a somber note. When you look back, are there some that you laugh at now? Like elements of it?
Oh, yeah, like tons. I feel like we have a ton of humor. I don't know if it's in the delusions themselves, but I like kept on losing my pants privileges at Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital. So I'd be in street clothes, but then when I would get
Oh,
a shot in the arm because I try and escape, they'd have to put you back into hospital
the
uniform
gown.
so that like you couldn't just make it out onto First Avenue and like be like going amongst the sane. And so I just think it's funny to have pants privileges. That makes me giggle.
I would say the most of the stuff, I'm trying to think, like, yeah, I mean, we joke occasionally about, so she punched me twice in the face, which really hurt. So we joke about that sometimes. There'll be a few other things that we sort of just like make light of, you know, when we're just like, oh, you know, that's like crazy. And we know what crazy actually is. But I would say the most of
Yeah.
the stuff that we like have a consistent sort of running joke is around your time in Bellevue, like playing crazy eights at a psych facility, just like generally being at Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital of all the places in the world to be, and all that that entailed was absolutely crazy. And so we make light of that kind of stuff. There's
Mm.
through line sources of humor that we hold on to for sure.
Yeah, I also feel like humor is deeply essential to me and like one in looking back on the experience, but also like in being an advocate. Like you were saying earlier, talking about suicide isn't fun. I was just like at a perinatal suicide prevention conference and speaking about that. I was doing a heavy talk, but also tons of laughter within it because I find if you can't laugh, you just get into like a dark hole. And I talked to a lot of other survivors, one that I was chatting with out there. And I feel like the bright side of this whole experience is I laugh so much more than I did
Mm.
before. I have so much more joy and gratitude. I'm deeply aware that in 5 minutes I could be dead. It sounds terrible to say, but to me, it's like, oh, it's a reason to really notice the way that light hits the wall or tell somebody, I really love you. I'm really lucky to have you in my life. And so I feel like humor and joy are so much part of my experience.
I have a
Yeah.
good one, which I think started off as a form of therapy. So Megan's sister is an artist, and so we were back here that December for a few weeks. We're at her studio, and she was doing art therapy with her sister.
It wasn't called that though.
No, it wasn't. But it was just like like us just being able to like be in the studio. And there's a coffee mug which I don't have around me, but I was drinking out of this morning. We were putting certain sayings on mugs and plates on it in big block letters. It says high risk of elopement.
Well, you wrote that one.
Oh yeah, so that was mine.
High risk.
That is what it said on the swinging locked doors going into the cycle.
Oh.
Was high risk of elopement. I sit there on my Zoom calls drinking my coffee, and people are like, "What does your mug say?" I'm like, "Funny and not so funny story." But it's like also it's great because I never really seen the term elopement being like escaping something.
Yeah, I
And
think
so
of weddings.
yeah, exactly. And so I wish I had it right, but I was literally drinking from this morning. So there's some
That is
fine
funny.
comedic things to be able to have
Yeah.
since then.
High risk of elopement. Who decided to put that there? I
Yeah,
wonder.
exactly. Yeah. It's like these people really want to get out, by the way.
There's humor in whoever, like the designers of
Yeah.
Bellevue psych
Yeah.
ward, perhaps. So speaking of Bellevue, this is an iconic hospital, like oldest public hospital in the US. And you said that it took 2 months for someone to use the word postpartum psychosis. Can you share what that was like for you?
Um, so this is December 2015, so it's a while ago. But I'll share what it was like for me. The f- the entire time I was there, I felt like I was being held against my will. I was only labeled as maybe bipolar and like we'll
Oh.
see, maybe bipolar. And so to me, like I literally had so much shame around everything that had happened that at one point during my stay, they were wheeling me down to get a CAT scan. And I was like, please let it be a brain tumor.
Oh.
Because I just wanted something physical
An
to
explanation,
explain
yeah.
what had happened. And it wasn't. And I was maybe bipolar. And then I was in aftercare for 6 weeks with a Bellevue psychiatrist, first female and then a male, subbed in for her for one visit. And then they called and where they were like, would you like to continue on in Bellevue care? And I was like, sure. But my sister was like, why don't you try and advocate for somebody who's like a mother? Because she was like, I feel like this is connected to like what's going on. And I was like, can I be seen by somebody who's a mom? I happened into the care of somebody who was a fellow in reproductive psychiatry. She was awesome, Dr. Christina On. And she was the
Mm.
first person when I explained what had happened. She's like, you had postpartum psychosis. And I was like, it's 8 months, 8 months. So, there it's still not a diagnosis in the United States. It's not in the DSM. Even though there is a proposal to get it in the DSM right now, they're trying, it's only going to be in the first couple weeks, is my understanding. So this is late. I was like, well, what about it happened here? And she said, there's dialogue around how late it can happen. She's like, but you had this. And to me, it felt like this overinflated balloon had finally like,
Mm.
it just like, it made so much sense. I was like, oh, okay. And I know I was starting to wean Millie, right? And the hormonal fluctuations that happened then. I was mostly weaning her because I was working a ton, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so it all made so much sense. And it felt like the beginning of feeling like, oh, I can start to like work with this. I'm not just a shameful mess. There's a name for this thing, and now I can try and figure out how to keep going.
Hmm.
I will say, because I've been writing about this, requested my records from Bellevue. And I noted on one of them, it says maybe postpartum psychosis. But remember, it's not a diagnosis. So they had never mentioned that to Colin as a possibility. And when I told him
Oh.
that was listed there, he started tearing up. He's like, oh my God, if somebody could have said this temporary and treatable thing called postpartum
Yeah.
psychosis, I would have felt like maybe I'll get my
So
life
much
back.
relief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Ah.
it was really
So
disappointing.
you were in Bellevue Hospital and then you do an outpatient program? How long were you in the hospital versus outpatient?
Yeah. I will also say one thing before, like, while I do think it's so sad that not enough general psychiatry understands reproductive psychiatry, it's like a real disservice to women.
Yeah.
I will say, in terms of Bellevue, they gave me great care in terms of
Mm.
they treated me like the threat I was to myself from the moment I walked in
Mm.
through the times I wanted to escape until I was able to leave. And I've read stories of other not as well equipped hospitals where people have made it to a window to jump or whatnot. And they had my safety front and center. So I'm deeply grateful to them. The staff was really caring.
Which I will say, in hindsight, I look back on it, I'm like, yes, everything she just said is absolutely correct. She got great care. They were experts. Dear God, in the moment, I hated every single second of her being there. I did not feel like she was getting good care at the time. I felt like she was being neglected. I hated that she was in a co-ed psych ward with no locks on doors. There was just a lot of like, oh, don't cross this blue line or that's somebody else's room. And I was like, this is not safe. It took until, turns out, don't go to a psych ward on a Saturday morning because then you won't see your doctor until Monday afternoon, which was really hard. She got great care in the moment. I spent almost every waking time when I wasn't working or taking care of the kids trying to find a way to get her into a different facility.
And I would say an asterisk on great care. They treated me like the threat I was. From the
Sure.
moment I
Yes.
walked in, without a
Yeah,
doubt.
fair.
Is it great care? No. Is there great care for women in the United States around these things? There's like one, two mother baby units. When I asked for a breast pump, I was handed this self pump thing. Obviously, great care is a mother baby unit, right? And so that doesn't really exist in our country much. That being said, I'm deeply grateful I was treated like a threat to myself and kept physically safe the entire time I was there. I found the staff generally to be caring, especially the people who led group and whatnot. So what that looked like is I was in there for, I think it was 11 nights actually. And then you're in 6 weeks of aftercare. You see a social worker before you leave. You are with an aftercare psychiatrist that you see about weekly, a couple days after, and then weekly. So then you're in regular touch with a psychiatrist for 6 weeks. That being said, I was sent home and wasn't given any sleep meds. And I don't know about you, but like it was deeply, deeply traumatic to me to lose my mind. And I had so much PTSD. And so going home and not having like a ton of understanding about what had happened or clarity around what a road to healing might look like was so challenging. A lot of the work I do now is I lead support groups for women who've had postpartum psychosis. It's almost like me like reaching through the Zoom screen and like giving past Meghan a giant hug and telling her you're going to be okay. And it doesn't have to be like collecting breadcrumbs in the dark. Here are 10 things you can do. It's really sad to me that just as much disinformation or lack of information around postpartum psychosis, just as prevalent as sort of that is the journey to healing is still like so not well documented and known about. The number of times I'm on a call with a woman and we're talking about their medication or a form of therapy that might help them. And I'm the one being like, like they're like, oh, my doctor never said that. It's so maddening to me, the quality of care for women in this country around reproductive psychiatry. So anyway, but to answer your question, 11 nights in Bellevue, 6 weeks of aftercare, and then I went into regular psychiatric care. But that's when I landed in the chair of this fellow who knew reproductive psychiatry. And that was really the beginning of doing the good work of kind of really healing.
That's amazing. I want to learn more about your support groups that you host. That sounds really helpful. That's something I see too. Women receive such different care, even in medication. I was sent home with lorazepam. I took lorazepam for like 6 days. And then my primary care doctor was like, we can't do this long term. Like, we need to get you off of it. So then I didn't have any medication.
Wow.
So then I was just really, really, I had PTSD around sleep because I didn't sleep for a week. And so sleep became like this focus. You were not sent home with anything?
I wasn't sent home with anything for sleep, which I think I should have been.
Oh,
Because honestly, like you're saying, I was so paranoid that if I went one night without sleep, it would happen again. To the point that
the doctors were almost like scared us into that of being like, sleep, 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 sleep. You gotta get sleep. It's all about sleep.
although you are a good sleeper. So literally, just as an example, the first night I couldn't sleep. Mind you, I've been in a psych hospital. I get home that day, I try and go to sleep. I can't go to sleep. And I just woke up in the night and I'm like, Colin, I'm going to Dwayne Reed. I'm gonna go get a sleep aid. And he's like, are you crazy? And I'm like, I don't think so, but I need sleep or else I might be. So I walked by myself at 2 a.m. to Dwayne Reed and got something for sleep just so I could get enough to maintain sanity. I will say though, I was given lithium as a drug for a year after postpartum psychosis. I prophylactically took it when I had my third son. The second I gave birth, I took lithium.
what was that like deciding to have another?
Wild. We were not ready. There's about a 4.5 year, 5 year age gap between our second and our third. 2 felt like a lot. That was a combination of postpartum psychosis. That was like we moved, needing kind of a break. And I did not want to have a third child for a couple different reasons. One, I just like was like, I think we're good with 2. And then also like I just did not want to, that wasn't the worst experience of my life. I was around having another child. The idea that a recurrence is roughly 1 in 2, 1 in 3. If you have PPP, it's going to happen again. That's not like a 1% chance. That's a really good chance it's going to happen again. I was scared shitless of that. I did not want that. It sounded too scary. Why are we introducing this high risk, potentially deadly thing back into our lives again? Ultimately, we worked hard to come up with a plan to get there, and we did. I'm
I can
so
be
glad.
persuasive.
She can be very persuasive.
And the 1 in 3 risk, it's important to say, is without medication. He also wanted to try to not be medicated because I feel like I'd done so much work on myself and some of the tendencies that kept me kind of pushing, like perfectionism, a little bit of type A, like stuff that kind of had me abandoning myself to keep everything else afloat. I knew how to work with it. So I was kind of like, I am a better person. I know how to take care of myself better. And I think we can do this unmedicated. And he was like, hell no.
I was like, under no circumstances is that happening. My concern was like, okay, but what if you kill the kids?
Yeah.
Like,
when I was like, I want to have another baby, he's like, what if you kill the kids this time? He like Googled and he saw infanticide. And I was like, okay, not what you want your partner to say when you tell them you want to have another baby. It's like, what if you kill the baby? It was a real fear. And it happens. That fear and understanding of how niche the knowledge of reproductive psychiatry is in our country put us in a place of like, okay, you're going to have to be in the driver's seat here. If you're going to do this, you're going to have to advocate for what you need. What that looked like is taking lithium proactively. I like literally would read studies about lithium and breastfeeding, and I would like call the hotline and talk to them because I think it's like an L4, which means like possibly hazardous if you breastfeed. I would like talk to the person. I'm like, what would you do if you were me? The sample sizes are so small for this kind of thing. Ultimately, we ended up taking lithium. I breastfed my son for 3 years. I tried to go to one pediatrician who was like, sorry, I'm not going to see you unless you take Abilify. It's safer for the baby's milk. And my reproductive psychiatrist was like, we know lithium's safer for you and we need to prioritize that right now. So then I found another pediatrician who I sent her these recent studies that my awesome reproductive psychiatrist here printed out for me. And the pediatrician reviewed the studies and she said, I read them. I feel comfortable with them. If you agree to the regular blood draws for the infant, then yes, I'd be happy to take your son as a patient, you taking lithium and breastfeeding. And so it's just like an example of all of the little kinds of advocacy that go with the lack of information around postpartum psychosis specifically, and also reproductive psychiatry generally, that I would say currently put everybody in a place of really needing to advocate for themselves. But we were scared enough and we knew enough that we put a plan in place and it turned out wonderfully.
There's so little information out there about postpartum psychosis generally, specifically in the recurrence aspect of it. If you really dig in, you're like, how many people are part of this study? It was 11 people. Well, that's a small sample size. And turns out 2 of them, it was like complicated. So they're not really part of it. So it's really down to 9 people. It just was wild what we were trying, the amount of research we were trying to do to try to best understand if this was possible or not. But great decision in the end.
Yeah. He's turning 6 on Saturday.
Wow, happy birthday to little boy.
Okay, I want to pause to talk about recurrence of postpartum psychosis and the data there. I pulled a couple meta-analyses that kind of spotlight what they were talking about with the blurriness. So 2020, there was a meta-analysis done that followed patients from 11 to 26 years after their experience with postpartum psychosis, and that showed a 1 in 2 chance of having a mood or psychotic episode outside of the postpartum period. That was another meta-analysis 5 years earlier had showed a relapse of 35%. So that's more like the 1 in 3 stat. And they saw that in that study, they were talking about how women with bipolar have reduced rates if they are medicated during pregnancy. And so, it's very prophylactic medication in pregnancy if you have a bipolar medication. And then later studies spotlight how for those who have no bipolar diagnosis but have had postpartum psychosis, the prophylactic approach just after giving birth is helpful to reduce your chances of recurrence. A separate study I'll mention, which was published in 2021 by Dr. Bergink, she was one of the authors on that paper. They followed 106 women for 4 years after their first psychosis and found a 1 in 3 chance of reoccurrence. And they defined recurrence as occurrence of depression, hypomania, psychosis, or a mixed state episode fulfilling DSM criteria, or admission to a hospital, or a restart of a medication. So a pretty broad. And I think when people think of recurrence of psychosis, they're looking for like, will I be psychotic and, be admitted to a hospital again? And this looks like it's pretty broad. So if you do restart a medication, you would have fallen under this 1 in 3 chance. And this was conducted in Rotterdam at a mother-baby unit. So perhaps the specialized mother-baby unit care could have helped bring that down too. But yeah, when you really dig into the data, you see how, there is a small number of women who have, in that Rotterdam study, they only found 2 women who experienced recurrence only after later pregnancies. And both of those had received a diagnosis of depression. So that's pretty low as far as pure PP. Though this was a shorter time frame for follow-up of only 4 years compared to much longer for those meta-analysis rates. Anyway, all this to say, it is blurry, and it's also real to sit down and be really realistic and practical and proactive about your care if you are in a high risk category.
I didn't know you could take lithium and breastfeed. This is new to me. So did you have to take a certain dosage, or was that the blood draws?
I took for me what was the therapeutic, what had worked in the hospital, which was always a pretty low dose for me. I took that prophylactically, and then you just have to have regular blood draws of the infant to check on their percentage and whatnot, which nobody wants to watch their kid get their little teeny baby get their blood drawn. But the other side of it is I literally breastfed him till he was 3. He's doing so great, but it was really scary because there's a real lack of information out there. And the link between research that we know and practice in pediatricians and OB/GYN offices is just not as tight. I was essentially that bridge, calling hotlines, advocating with the person. So it required so much self-advocacy.
Absolutely. I feel like that example is such healthy communication and marriage dynamics of hey, what do you need? What do I need? We're going to need lithium.
Yeah, totally.
So that's lovely. Colin, I'd love to hear more about how this experience impacted you.
Yeah.
Long term.
Yeah. Impacted me in a lot of different ways. Ironically, it was Meghan post being in the hospital that forced me to go see a therapist. I was not sleeping. My right eye twitched 24 hours a day. I was just had become basically kind of a mess of just taking care of the kids for 2 weeks, and we had people come in to help, but ultimately it was still on me. And so I feel in the short run, I had a deep resentment towards Meghan. That was really hard. I was just get through the crisis, and I want to be back the way she was. I had just buried inside anytime she would ask me to do anything post her coming back from the hospital. Oh, can you do the dishes or whatever else? I just wanted to be I never did, but I was oh, the trump card I could play right now of just really, you're gonna ask me to do something? And it was on the smallest things ever, and it just burned me on the inside that I just was had this how could you do this to us? It was only through therapy that I was able to work through those things and talk to somebody. Thank God I did. Thank God you
I made him go to therapy. I was I'm sorry, you have to go, or else we're
but I did
not
that
gonna work.
because it was it helped us both in the short run in those moments, but also we talk about this all the time. It was awful. It was the worst experience of my life, and I totally think it was worthwhile. I would not replace it with it not happening. As wild as that sounds, for something that was borderline near death experience for my wife or my children, it just changed who we are so much. I talked a little bit earlier about, I feel my own approach to other human beings and the rest of the world is different. I feel I approach it now with a much more and like a social emotional lens than I ever did before. And I'm certainly not perfect, nobody is, but it's been a real change for me in terms of being in touch with feelings. You talked about marital communication. I feel like we just have such open communication of exactly what we're feeling. Like, let me tell you this because then we can work on a solution together. It's like, I'm going to explode. I need to go for a run. What you said really got under my skin, but we able to have these open lines of communication that all stem from this experience of what we went through with postpartum psychosis. So I, in the long run, I just have sort of like, it's been like a slow evolution to where I am now of just being like, I have a lot more appreciation just for like people going through shit in their lives, whether it be mental health or otherwise. And it's like everybody's going through shit and needs to have the time and space to go through those things. And it's like you never know what someone else is going through. And I just feel like my appreciation for that now is so much higher than it was before because of what we went through.
Yeah, I've said I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, but I wouldn't change it. Like it's given me this broader life experience. So, cheers to that.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing. I think the biggest single thing is that we worked like dogs prior to. I worked in gun violence prevention, so after a mass shooting, there'd be times where I'd be working 18-hour days for months on end, and you go through these things, and even a regular day was like, okay, at work by 7:45, close down your BlackBerry at the time at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and now I think a big shift has been we have to prioritize ourselves as full humans and not just working robots. And seeing work-life balance as one of the most important things we can do for ourselves. If not, we've seen the terrible repercussions that can come when you are working yourself to the bone and not leaving time for the most important things in your life. I'm talking about the need for parental breaks. I'm talking about coaching soccer. If I don't have the work-life balance, I can't do those things that I need in order to, be able to go coach soccer. And so I would say like our approach to working, work hard when you're during working hours, but it can't and won't be our full life forever moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, how does it go? Work to live, don't live to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that, I had noted I'd love to hear from Megan, your mindfulness work. Can you share more about what that looks like?
Yeah. I think going through psychosis and having kind of like the mental narrative that I had always thought was true be replaced in an instant by something that was totally false got me really interested in the nature of mind. What I started to realize is that a lot of what was in my head wasn't necessarily the delusional plots that captured me that day and like overtook me, but a lot of it was not really friendly stuff that I didn't know if I wanted to believe. So I feel like there's a lot of societal conditioning up there around proving and shoulds. Personally, for me, I'm really dedicated to social justice. And then I also have this interesting sort of intersectionality where I'm like white and I have a decent amount of privilege. That makes it feel like, oh, do I really get to rest? I got to keep working for this cause. In the end, what I think is if I am not nurturing and tending to my human experience with compassion, then I'm limiting my humanity and I can't do my best showing up in the grocery store, showing up in a work setting. To me, the heart of mindfulness is embracing this human experience for all its wildness. Being aware of it is one part, and being really kind with it is another part. Those are the two parts of mindfulness. I teach people to see the thinking mind and to kind of like smile at it, right? It says some weird things, or at least mine does. And then like, oh, know that you're not alone. Thinking mind, oh, being a human, And the same thing with feelings and not being totally overrun by feelings, but knowing which ones you actually need to have a conversation with somebody about. If you haven't had a snack in a while and you're like, oh, what's the purpose of life? Like, oh, maybe you just need a snack. What I do now is I teach mindfulness via lots of mechanisms, and I just kind of try and hold this human experience with a little more levity and humor and compassion. In the end, it just makes me live better, honestly, and hopefully raise better humans too. But yeah, so that's what I do, is try and use that lens on what is mine from losing my own, to help people work with a really harsh critic up there people have, and soften it so that they're not living from shoulds and can'ts, and instead like really trying to live from what lights them up and makes them live on purpose. Because for me, the biggest gift of this experience is realizing that nothing is promised. Try and say what you mean and show up how you want as much as you can.
I love that.
In the same sort of vein,
what advice would you give to someone who's recently experienced postpartum psychosis?
Mine would be prioritize your own well-being like it's your full-time job, and do whatever you can to find your way back to yourself, and know that none of that is selfish and that it's really good work. Center that like your entire life depends on it. And if you commit to compassionately holding your experience, knowing you're not broken, and prioritizing your well-being, things are going to turn out way more beautifully than you could expect.
Colin, what advice would you give to a partner?
Yeah, I think for me, it's because oftentimes I feel like the severity of the person who went through psychosis is so extreme. Sometimes it can feel like your own experience isn't a traumatic experience in and of itself. And I would say acknowledge that what you went through was also really, really hard, and that what you're going through as part of that is really, really difficult. Don't compare it to this comparative suffering, especially to the person, your loved one next to you. Don't do that. Focus on and acknowledging what you went through is traumatic. I would say for me, I can only speak for myself. Going to therapy was the single most important thing to do. You should focus on your significant other and help them, but you've got to help yourself and get yourself through your own mental health crisis that has resulted from being a partner of somebody with postpartum psychosis. It's like grabbing your own mask first before helping, a loved one on a plane. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't help the other people around you. It's okay to feel, especially in the immediacy afterwards, it's okay to feel your feelings that come from that, and don't judge them. As I said, was so upset and annoyed with Meghan and felt like she's abandoned us. But then I was judging those feelings on top of that. My therapist was like, stop layering your feelings. This is when you get into real trouble, when you start feeling on top of feeling, well, I shouldn't feel this. How dare I feel judgment towards this? And so it's like, take care of yourself, feel your feelings, go see a therapist, and know that it's going to be very different, at least for a little while on the back end coming out of this. And to have open lines of communication between one another to help sort through it. Only when you can really openly communicate about everybody's feelings that you can work through it together.
Yes. Yes. The comparative suffering is so real, because it's like Meghan was the patient, but it's so traumatic. So you have to get care, really whole family care too. Yeah, I feel that that's important to incorporate. Like in the future, it'd be so nice if it was a whole family treatment plan for
Yeah.
someone discharged from postpartum psychosis.
Mhm.
so grateful to Meghan and Colin for coming on and sharing their story. I did have a few follow-up questions. It was a unique format to have both of them on at the same time, and they were kind enough to respond to those follow-up questions, and I'll just share. So one I had for Colin, he had mentioned wanting to get Meghan better care when she was at Bellevue, and I was curious what that looked like how he was advocating for her and without the language of postpartum psychosis, since that wasn't given to them, and what resources he had come across for better care. And he had shared that he essentially just wanted to get her out of Bellevue, felt like she was in a dangerous situation. And because of insurance constraints and sort of like, I don't know, distinction or like not working together across hospital systems, there was just roadblocks. He said he felt like he was yelling for someone to help him for 2 weeks straight, and then just no one could help him. So that's pretty frustrating. Would love to have him come on another time to talk in more depth about that partner experience. And he also shared that he didn't become aware of mother-baby units until much later. So that wasn't on his radar. And then a follow-up question I had for Meghan was, I was curious about her experience with cults. So she shared she did not have any particular interest or experience, and that sometimes she thinks about it as a cult or a scheme. And then she also shared this clip about that core theme of her psychosis. Here it is.
During my postpartum psychosis, I felt like there was some cultish scheme running the city, and it was all centered around money making. A lot of the stuff that had been going on in the news or in my life that was unprocessed trauma came out in my delusions that day. So as an example, a woman had been raped on my running route, and that became a part of my delusions. There had been some high-profile killings of a Black boy and a Black man, one in my hometown and one in the city I lived in, at the hands of the cops, that came out in my delusions. I was actually screaming Black Lives Matter as the cops were handcuffing me to take me to the hospital. I kept going, reading the news, and not really taking time to process all that was happening in the world. And so when I kind of broke, it all found a way out through these delusions. In terms of the core theme of my psychosis, I couldn't language it until years later, after the birth of my third child. He was born in November 19, and I must have been about like 6 months postpartum. I shot up in the middle of the night, and I was like, oh my God, it was the cult of the white patriarchy that was after me that day. And I scribbled down the thought because I was postpartum and I wanted to be mindful of the delusions that might return. And then a few days later, I brought it to my reproductive psychiatrist, and I told her, hey, I had this thought. Do you think that's okay to think? But of course, I had also come with all of the rationale for why. Things like, reproductive psychiatry isn't something that is required for people to know about, despite the fact that it affects half the population. Maternal mental health conditions are the most common complication of childbirth, and yet not well known about or talked about enough in providers and the public. There's no paid leave, a whole sort of list of things, all kind of rooted in the fact that our society values profits and domination over our kind of collective well-being and interdependence. That was the core theme of my psychosis.
All right, as we wrap, I want to share a few resources. As we discussed here, finding care and support can be complicated. So if you are wanting to meet with a reproductive or perinatal psychiatrist, there's a few paths you can look at. One is PSI, Postpartum Support International, has a perinatal mental health provider directory. That is great. It looks like from the international queries I ran, it's most robust if you're based in the US. But for those in the US, you can search by location and specialty, and they will show you insurance coverage for that provider. So unfortunately, more broadly, internationally, it's not mature, it looks like, but definitely you could also ask for a referral from your providers, either your psychiatrist if you've met with one, or your OBGYN or midwifery. You might also try looking at local universities or universities in your region who might have a perinatal health center that could provide some resources. So PSI also offers postpartum psychosis specific support groups that are available globally. There's different times. It looks like it's on Mondays, but you can sign up for those. I will link how to sign up for those in the show notes. And Meghan volunteers as a facilitator for some of those groups. So much rich experience there, helping create spaces that are grounded, compassionate, and deeply informed by lived experience. So recommend looking at those if you haven't. You can also find Meghan's work and offerings through her website. She has one-on-one consults for people or families preparing for subsequent pregnancies after perinatal mental health illness. She's drawing from everything she's learned personally and professionally, and she's created a postpartum planning resource from everything that she learned to help people think through prevention, support, and care as you are expecting. So I will link that resource as well. If you want to stay connected to her writing and musings, she has a newsletter called I Love You Just the Way You Are. It's a collection of musings on the mind and mindfulness. I have loved getting it so far. It's thoughtful reflections on what it means to have a mind and to live a full human life. And that way you'll be informed when her memoir comes out. She has written it and is working to publish a memoir that will go deeper on her experiences. So thanks again to Meghan and Colin for sharing their experience. We're going to look forward to some more partner perspectives in the new year. So thank you for listening. Take care.